Welcome to You Said What? This is the program where we attempt to answer your Bible questions. If you have a question during the program, all you have to do is email hroncancio@me.com. hroncancio@me.com. Our panelists today are Dr. Bert Alexander, who is the Associate Minister at the Webb Chapel Church of Christ and also the chaplain for the Farmers Branch Fire Department, and Steve Steele, who is the founder and director of James Group Ministries, a faith-based recovery ministry. And I am Bob Nienstadt. Our question for today is, why does the church seem irrelevant to me? We base that question on the fact that the fastest growing religious group in America is the group that could be called the nones or the dropouts. And those are people who used to be a part of a religious organization and have dropped out for some reason. And there are approximately 30 million of those people in America. Dr. Bert, what do you think about that?
Well, I think what goes on in America and North America is 50 years later than whatever was going on in Europe. If you'll look at the current cultural scene in Europe, the cathedrals are empty. The people are not going to church. The only ones that come to the cathedrals are tourists. I believe that probably here in the United States that many of the younger people have grown up in families where they were forced to go to church, and when they got old enough to make their own decisions, they determined that it didn't hit their buttons the way they wanted it to be, and maybe they decided they still believe in God, but they don't believe in the church.
Okay, Steve, what do you think?
Any group of people that's that large and that disconnected themselves, they don't see themselves as a group. They don't participate in that nature of thinking together. They don't gather up and say, let's not go to church. However, their numbers say something. They speak of a kind of mindset. And I think that they aren't getting what they need. And of course, you don't get what you need if you don't go, but at the same time, you have to really take a look at, is the church providing for them what they expected when they were going? Was it a country club, or was it a place where they could actually build faith within themselves first and then share that with each other? If we were to do nothing but just gather as Christians and just talk about what we'd seen God do in either our lives or someone else's, that would in turn strengthen the kind of God that we serve. It's what the Jews did thousands of years ago when they decided not to call God by His name. I know it was a forbidden thing, but at the same time it was also inadequate. Just like if I were to call you by your name and expect everyone to know who you are, simply by your name would be inadequate. And then they began to build a list of names for God that described who He was. The Lord's Prayer is a good idea sometimes to start out with when you're looking for names for God. Our Father who art in heaven tells about who He is to us and where He's located. And so if we didn't do anything but just talk to others about what we've seen Him do and where He is and how He does it and how He's different from us, and gather and share evidence of Him, then I think we might actually have a chance at meeting again for good reason.
Well, what do you think are some of the reasons why people feel that the church is irrelevant? But like I've come across a few people who have dropped out, of course, and who have told me that they just don't feel spiritual when they go there. But what do you think are some of the other reasons why they just don't see church as something important?
Well, the Mediterranean culture is one of shame. that's the reason why you have to be real careful in dealing with folks from the Middle East, that you don't say something that will offend them, or they will consider to be shameful, because they'll fight about it for centuries afterwards. I think within the Christian culture, we have developed kind of a sense of a culture of guilt. Got to go to church because I've got to go to church. Mom would drag you out on Sunday morning and make you go, and you'd suffer through being at church. And when you got to be old enough where you could make your own decisions, usually by the time they're out of high school and into college, they drop out completely.
Our goal as Christians has often been to try to follow the rules. It appears to me that if that's all you're going to do is try to follow the rules, then ordinances are probably not going to do the job. I don't know about you, but I drove too fast getting here today. I did not follow the rules. I didn't get caught because I played the odds. You can't catch everybody. And so rule making and ordinances have never been foolproof. Even in Moses' time, when he came down off of Mount Sinai with, I don't know, how many were there, Doctor?
There were 10 that he broke.
Okay, at least 10, right? And so we have to start thinking about what would motivate people to do good things and to be good. I have often talked to people about the idea that they might have a best friend in their life, and I have one, and most people either grow up with one or they have one that they've created that's of long term. They've been a friend with those people for a long time. And I asked them, well, when's the last time you visited your friend? And they would say, well, last week we had lunch together. And I said, well, what did you do after that? Well, we went over to their house and we visited a little while longer. And I said, well, when you walked in their house, it just made you want to steal something from them, didn't it? Mm-hmm. And they look at me with a very ridiculous look on their face, like, what do you mean, Steve? Why would I want to steal from my friend? And there is the reason, do you understand, that we might consider doing the right thing is because of the relationship that we have with that person keeps us from doing something we shouldn't do. And so if we were to have that kind of relationship with Christ, it's probable that we would probably be good most of the time, unless we forgot that he was our friend. And that can happen sometimes too. So when we move the ordinances from thinkings to how we think to how we feel, then we start to move people in a direction that's probably workable, that's going to be, what would you call it, godly?
Mm-hmm. Well, Jesus said that he came to bring us the truth and that the truth would set us free, and yet it seems like as human beings we have this penchant for making rules and wanting to keep rules, and often we overemphasize the rule keeping in the place of the heartfelt spirit, like you were talking about.
Well, rules are tangible. I know how where I sit, where I stand, based on a rule. If I follow the rule, then I know where I'm at. When we get into what really true Christianity is about, it's relational, and it's not about keeping rules. Mm-hmm. It's about being in a relationship with Jesus Christ, and we are hardwired to want to be able to check things off the list and say, yes, I did this, as in the rich young ruler who comes to Jesus and says, hey, I want to get a part of this Jesus program you've got going on here. I've got a lot to offer. And Jesus says, well, have you kept the commandments? And he said, since I was a child. And he starts rattling off 2 or 3 of the 10 commandments. And Jesus said, well, you're lacking one thing. And he scratches his head and he said, what could I possibly be lacking? And Jesus says, you need to sell all you have and give it to the poor. Well, this is not an indictment on the rich. It's just a matter of saying, it's going to get tough down the road, pal, and I need you to depend on me as your Savior and not on your pocketbook whenever times get tough.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we do depend on other things. Idolatry is alive and well.
Absolutely.
In our world. I don't know about you guys, but I've dreamed of cars that I thought would make my life better. Mm-hmm. I don't know what God feels like when I say that to me or think that. I'm almost afraid to ask Him. But the idea, do you understand, that a car would make me feel the way I'm supposed to feel when I think of Him is a jealousy-producing device.
Correct.
I'm pretty sure He is, or at least He says He is. Mm-hmm. And I know that there's more things than that. All I have to do is just ask a female, are you having a bad hair day today? And I can tell you that how they feel that day is sometimes determined on whether or not their hair looks like it ought to look. And so we get materialistic that way. I tell you, my kids can make me, really change my attitude really, really fast. And so if I can even think in terms of idolatrous thinking simply by saying, what in your life has the right to change the way you feel at any given time, besides God? And I'll bet you could come up with a list.
Sure.
Is there anything that we could do that would help people to start to develop the idea of importance in the church? Is there anything that we could give them or do for them, or whether it's just Bible scriptures or whether it's a life lived or what, to actually help to develop that feeling in them?
Well, it's almost cliche, but every man probably has a God-shaped hole in his heart, and we try to stuff things into it to fill up that hole. People that I come in contact with whose life has gone on the skids or off the tracks, they have a tendency to be looking for God in all the wrong places, and they see God as someone that fills their physical needs and their emotional needs and their financial needs, and whenever God is actually the one that's there to fill your spiritual needs. And when those needs get met, a lot of this other stuff comes into play.
I think we have to not make a machine out of religion.
Yes.
And we do. We make machines out of everything. We make machines out of cleaning the house. Yeah. We do it the most efficient way. Mm-hmm. We do it for the least amount of money. We do it, you understand, that in such a way as to accomplish the task according to our rules. And if you make a machine out of religion, then at some point, you understand, you have to get it pretty heavily involved in works to make it to heaven, mm-hmm. in a mindset sort of way. It's long been said that religion is for people that are like afraid to go to hell. Mm-hmm. Spirituality is for people that have been there. And so there seems to be the inclination right there that there might be a need for God produced by some difficulty in life. Anyone who has been faced with a situation that they are truly powerless over and have absolutely no hope of changing without something greater than them have missed an opportunity to actually engage in a relationship with Christ and God through Christ that would produce miraculous things sometimes. I think people are looking for big miracles all the time, when sometimes a little one would be good and fine and a beginning. I think patience and tolerance is what's going to be required for us to make people feel good in church, because it takes a long time to develop a relationship. Just look at the one you have with your mother-in-law. How long did that take? Just look at the one you have with your boss. How long a relationship is that? It's just not going to be the quick and dirty drive-through relationship that people are looking for in churches these days. You're going to have to establish a long-term kind of relationship, and you must spend the time.
Well, I think part of the problem is we've got too much religion in the church.
Mm-hmm.
Think about it, guys. How many times is the word religion used in the New Testament? 3 times.
Not very many.
And 2 of them in one verse. And that has to do with pure religion, has to do with taking care of orphans and widows. What has happened is we have become pharisaical in that we have made our Christianity into a religion. And this religion has given it a bad name. It's like Christendom is a bad, it's a bad rap for what the church is all about.
Mm.
Well, just so we don't leave our listeners with the idea that church is unimportant, I would like to read 2 scriptures here just to make a connection for us. And one is in Acts chapter 2 and verse 41, and then continued in verse 47. And it says, "Those who accepted his message were baptized, and about 3,000 were added to their number that day." And in verse 47 then it says, "And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved." So this first group of Christians on that day were added together by God, not by human beings, and they were added into what is called the church. But there was a connection there between their salvation and the church, being that body of the church. I'm concerned that people who have dropped out of churches are failing to make that connection with their salvation.
Let's look at that situation and break it down just a little bit. What did they receive that day?
The gift of the Holy Spirit.
So they had something happen to them.
Right.
Do you understand? It's not
Right.
something they did, it's something that
Yep.
was done for them. And that is how they got added, do you understand? Not by some effort of their own.
Right.
And so, I'm going to go back to what I said in the beginning. What if all we did was, and what if all we were known for was, oh yeah, those people, those Christians, all they do is gather up and talk about what they've seen God do today. Then at some point, do you understand, they are participating in a like event, in that they don't talk about themselves or what they've done. They're not proud of their efforts. What they're proud of is their surrender, their let's see what God can do with this kind of giving up, if you will, the power, the influence, the money, the big buildings, the big budgets. Why don't we just sit in a house, maybe 15 or 20 of us, and just gather once a week and start talking about what we saw God do today or yesterday or last week? Because I'm pretty sure that's what the first century church was doing. They were frightened first, weren't they? What else were they? Persecuted, right? They would be killed if they were found out. So hiding and being secret or quiet, you understand, was a big deal. Small groups, not great big giant ones. And were they looking for God to help them? Did they need God? Well, it was God or death. And so was there some powerlessness there? Well, we can't even protect ourselves. We need Him, and we need Him desperately. And so at some point, do you suppose He showed up in their lives? Well, apparently He did, or we wouldn't have Christianity today. And so how can we duplicate those things that worked? Why are we trying things, do you understand, that don't?
Right.
Why don't we just duplicate what worked?
Exactly.
And make that happen?
Yep, exactly. Well, we want to thank you for listening to our program today. We'd like to invite you to listen to further programs. Remember, the name of our show is You Said What? And on our next program, we're going to be discussing, why is God letting this happen to me?